Shirley here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and this is a little bit of vehicles news. Mercury is pinpointing the Venus-Jupiter meeting on Sirius that we had, and it's happening together with Venus and Jupiter cohabiting in around Procyon. And what we have is a drone ship basically sailing to the Strait of Hormuz, and yeah, that's nice. Rare opportunity window for Tel Aviv real estate. Speculative investment, they said, is going to be on the rise. um, are they going to do Tel Aviv, New York? Anyway, U.S. Navy autonomous surface vehicle rescued 2 U.S. Army helicopter crew members after their Apache helicopter was shot down in Strait of Hormuz off the coast of Oman. So, the surface drone that assisted in Monday's night rescue of the Apache crew off the coast of Oman was a U.S. Navy Corsair unmanned surface vessel operated by the U.S. Fifth Fleet Task Force 59. So this is the aviation maritime, and we have Venupiter basically applying to trine Neptune. It's a wide orb, but it's Procyon applying to trine Neptune. Mercury pinpoints the Venupiter that we had in on Sirius in the middle decan, bless you, which is known to have a lot of aviation technology booms. Okay, if you think about the Concorde, think about crossing the supersonic boom. That's the Venupiter on Sirius, and we're also not too far from Jupiter Uranus that we had at the end of Taurus. And Jupiter Uranus around Taurus is going to be around currency. People talk about digital currency, but we're going to shift our thinking regarding currency and the Venusian. Now, with the outer planets, as usual, we have some sort of a duality there. There are people that are learning to take from, for example, one of the things I'm working on is to take from orgasmic birthing prep to life changes and launching of projects and ideas. Other people go the complete other direction, which is determining every single factor of the fetus using eugenics and artificial wombs. And so the duality of the project, so one concentrates on the way of conception and the experience of conception and the experience of birthing as the parental-child relations, whereas the other emphasizes on the particulars that we can decide, perhaps trying to avoid certain genetic or hereditary elements through the genes or gene alternations, is going to create a peak market for the rare diseases or rare genomic diseases, where we have a cure for gene 55, for gene 33 we don't have. That's going to create a booming of the market, whereas the orgasmic birthing processes is going to give us the sociological and societal and ecosystemic holistic perspective, kind of brainstorming from completely different direction, where we see that the tribes that were resistant to colonialism were either matriarchal, more along the line of orgasmic birthing, or where rape was considered incompetence. Now, those two things are what are sort of the manifestation both of the Jupiter Uranus in Taurus, which is the spirit and matter, Uranus Sedna, Uranus in Gemini, the sociological look into different cultures. It's both cultural revolution, but bringing from cultures. This is the transit that got us the news that, oh, in Iceland they hunted the warlocks, where everywhere else they hunted the witches, and Iceland sustained centuries of imperial expeditions, and they maintained some sort of adaptation with, elves and Christianity, that is beyond fascinating. Missing data. I think we're missing works on the Garai people. The Garai people. When I search, let's say, social media, I find no more than one or two things, and then I would only find information through the Crusade expeditions or the Jesuits that didn't get them to convert. We have some information about the Bontoc people, and basically the tribes that were either more matriarchal, but matriarchal, when I say matriarchal, I don't mean that the men do, let's say, the politics and the economy, and the women do the weaving of the clothes, and are still underappreciated, although they are the line of inheritance. I mean, it's an interesting polarization, talking about the Menanki Bao, of course. But there is a lot of sociological studies that we are missing in the universities where studies are done. I was looking for the work of Professor Violeta Pericliva, and her work is quoted through other people without mentioning her name. She made a fantastic work around the ethnography regarding the separation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the move from the relocation to the cities, the cultural differences between people that leveled up in the city and their families that were expecting, let's say, a share or a dividend. So and that can be ascribed to the sociology of the scientific endeavor within academia, probably affected by the Epstein dossiers, which negatively affected the development of the sciences, and the accessibility of grants to researchers, for bringing in practices and motives that are, how should I say, I believe create some sort of stagnation in the sciences, and put to tremendous stress the people that were involved or affiliated pretty much over nothing. Like, in the sense that, when we think about the lineages that are coming more from orgasmic birthing, for example, today I saw a video of a trans man having a baby, and they are he is not so disturbed by the hormonal effect to the fifth vital sign, which I have to stress that is not a given. Okay, okay, it's not a given, and it's also the reversibility of such transitions is also not a given, and this is very important. However, it was fascinating, and it seems like a lot of people focused on the fact that that a man is given a baby, and it's like, oh, what are they doing to their children? I'm like, I was way more focused around um, facilitating orgasmic birthing than the gender of the parent giving birth. Um, and of course, on not idealizing, just as I would warn from those who would say, oh, just have natural birth and so on, and you can do it. Some people are definitely scheduled to do it, and they're going to see that the hospital is kind of a no place for them and so on. But the accessibility, let's say if I would ever try to have a baby, I would probably want the ability to have a C-section, the ability for medical intervention, um, because and I will give you also the reason. My bodily structure, so in my facial physiognomy, is a result of lineages that had wedding at puberty. With my mother, and her brother, the only exception that I know to that. Um, uh, yeah, and we ended up being a family of natal moon, navel nakshatra moons, which is considered that all of us are creatively incompatible with one another. You see that a lot, um, also in lineages where the emphasis on orgasmic birthing was not there. People would either wed immediately at puberty, or they did not have the notion of the emphasis on the intimacy, and that can create, of course, a lot of relational issues as well. On the structure of the bone structure, it became a little bit limiting the fascia, a little bit limiting the thyroid. A lot of people that think they have mental mood disorder, it can be such a thing. And when people don't touch on the topic of aligning the toes, not just the big toe, but the toes, doing fascia drainage, lymph nodes exercise, um, even when it's a family of athletes, okay, and that can affect also the will to live, being able to optimistically look at things, um, life transitions, creative solutions to problems that are actually per individual. Um, so, and then the curation of that, because it's a bone structure, because I will always need to spend a lot of time aligning my big toe, because it's not just a surgical intervention issue, but also a holistic perspective, an environmental perspective, engineered and compatible for orgasmic birthing lineage. We would see it because people would have traumas of sensitivity to temperature, to light, balance of rest and sleep, needing for the work to be meaningful. We would look for the satisfaction in career, but without the ability to bring things into fruition. And so it would feel like all the adaptations don't come to fruition. People that would try to help us would feel drained as well. And the expectancy was always that people would, I don't know, if a person is claustrophobic or agoraphobic, that they would become desensitized and merge into the existing structures. And no, it's actually, it's a structural adaptation where changing the structure from within is also architecture of external structure that can facilitate basically the orgasmic birth in lineage that a lot of the West has lost along the trajectory. Now, realistically, if I'll try to have, let's say, kids ever, then of course I would still need the medical intervention that would allow me to have a birth that is not traumatic by the merit of me trying to go au natural. And the awareness that to begin with, these technological hypes began with practices like wedding at puberty that probably were survivalistic practices, and they caused persecution and exile, and then um, it created sustainability in really uncomfortable environments. But as we begin to grow the environment, also we are growing, and this is where there are a lot of questions that come about with this period of the time. We see both the concern about water, but also the question of how to work with the water when it comes to the North Sea. Netherlands, that is below sea level, is dealing with that question. Perhaps a shift of approach in the way that we've been dealing with the risk, the constant risk of flood. Uranus is applying to trine. We're applying to have a bisextile of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto from the air and fire. And yeah, Moon Chiron, 29-degree Aries. Think about just the fact of something as simple as fascia alignment affecting the will to live, and fertility, optimism, solution-oriented thinking, and puts a lot of questions on what is called choice. Um, whereas we're not full, or we're not completely, and then it exposes an underlying structure that provides a lot of field for research, field for sociological education, architectural inspiration, um, and even challenging the constant war military and economic strategies. With Chiron in Taurus, we're going to see it a lot. That the economy, for the economy to economy, If we take a look at the economy of the 70s, we're going to do study live with me because we're going to do the 60s and 70s because we transitioned from the boomers to Gen X, and I want to see that transition. Let's take a look at a little AI scan. 1960s, golden age of expansion, booming consumerism. 1970s, the era of stagflation. And this is what we should be looking at when we are looking at Chiron in Taurus. For example, I noticed that in my wardrobe, because it's a Venus sign and Venus is clothes, and definitely clothes absolutely affect our feeling. But I also noticed it was like today I was wearing kind of like some beautiful artifact that I found in the big city, and then it had a little bit of a stain, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't even know how to remove that type of stain. Now, I was never a big consumerist on clothing. Whenever I bought a big purchase of clothes, I noticed something dramatic shifted in my life that had nothing to do with clothing. Like for example, in the subprime crisis, I was buying a better wardrobe because I wanted a better job. I wanted to look more representative and see what other job opportunities are open for me, and dedicated to treating my face and so on. And so after that, it was a subprime crisis. I went through a mental health crisis and got funding for my degree. I was no longer the same size. I wasn't wearing the same clothes. It was just, yeah, it was just not, and and I was wearing whatever it came to be about. In fact, there was a time where I was actually, and then I remember there was Model UN, and we were forced to buy representable clothes. It never worked for me. Like something happened. I don't know if it was nervous system hacking or what. I had terrible mishaps one after the other. But it became for me being completely resistant to looking at the clothes and what is immutable. Basically, what could I wear for Model UN? And it shifted my wardrobe completely. Again, later I would be completely not the same size of these clothes. I don't even remember what happened to these clothes. And then I moved to study my second degree. Um, then it was a time where my neighbor would give me clothing, and so she would buy clothes, sometimes fit, sometimes not. She would give me clothes. It would be wonderful clothes. I was wearing these clothes, and then I became. It was in between houses, like millennials say, in between jobs. So I was in between houses. I was visiting Netherlands, and then I would wear what was on in the shelter. There's something a little bit traumatic for me around fixing my room, cleaning things, throwing things, rejuvenating things, um, and around my clothes. Because it's like it's kind of like I would shift something in my life would shift, but I would not necessarily have, like, if I would buy expensive clothes, I would not necessarily be in the same size. If I would if I would wear whatever is, then I would not necessarily be I had a mother that had designed clothes And then I was wearing her designs and her clothes. And then it was like she learned how to do the nails, and then I was coming to school with nails that look big and and people didn't understand. I was like, "You're not a child at risk. What happened?" Because of course I was asking the colors of the soccer team that was the other soccer team that the people who were bullying wore for. So I came with this weird yellow and blue nails. And I watched one game and I couldn't anymore. um, so now when we're looking at the 70s, collapse into stagflation, stagnant economic growth, and skyrocketing inflation. And this is where if I take a look at my wardrobe, because we're probably going to see it on those mundane things. And this is where if I was like, oh, there's that one thing that fits, I need to learn how to remove the stains from it. It's kind of like, oh, I need to learn how to sustain the existing items of clothing, which is of course more ecosystemic. And it perhaps can lead to some sort of a slowing down. Um, OPEC oil embargoes in 73 and 79 quadrupled fuel prices. Again, we see the stare of Hormuz with the constant threat of oil embargoes. And I would not ascribe that to Chiron in Taurus per se. In the 70s, we had Pluto in Venus sign, we had Pluto in Libra. Um, but currency is definitely Chiron Venus. High unemployment, industrial layoffs caused jobless rates to climb significantly. Again, how should I say that? With Taurus, the curation for this issue is, I believe, taking practices from orgasmic birthing prep. Because what we're seeing is that work is not yielding. If I think about the weird behavior of the IRS towards my account, it was like, wait a second, I was trying to open a business. I went through horrors, was at life risk, didn't get help from the institutions that were supposed to provide. None of the private, none of the public sector. And then there is another thing that basically tries to seal the deal on me trying to rehabilitate. So internally, shadow work wise, I look at the middle decan of Taurus, where I have my sun ruler of the 6th, and I say, well, I need to learn the balance of work and rest within. And my 10th house is not compatible for, let's say, corporation, unless that corporation is willingly, consensually says to me, Shirley, please come and revolutionize our place from the core. Do your weird stuff here. By the way, if you know such a corporation, because um, with Uranus in Gemini, there is this um, debating regarding Should we be in the village? Should we be in the city? Um, and more things that come about with this one. Manufacturing jobs moved abroad, creating the Rust Belt. Deindustrialization. Now, this is going to be a really funny union of Chiron in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius. But you know, when I was a child, I was afraid to move out of the city. And then the thought that is like, oh, there is internet there, or people can work remotely. The funny thing, I remember when I tried to arrange, I tried to um, do a little bit of rock-based dams on the slopes towards the Dead Sea to try to prevent the flood. It was the cornerstone of cornerstones, okay? It was the first time in my life that either something was trying to emulate being an alien energy, because and later I figured that Standard Oil is willing to drill there, and I'm like, well, it doesn't have to be a one. It doesn't have to be one on the account of another. But definitely that would be a work and rest balance that is unprecedented. Um, so for me, it is interesting because I was born in 1984. So I was born around a nuclear leak and at the aftermath of the confiscation of the banks. If I try to compare it, by us, there was an attempt to do a tech boom, but it was, and speaking from Israel, which is a high tech nation, um, it was the time I remember when I was at school and Benjamin Netanyahu said he wanted a computer for every child. And in some schools, the computer was sitting by the door as holding the door from, yeah. And, but the booming of the internet, um, uh, the time where people would, we would hack OkCupid in later years. We would hack OkCupid. It's like it was supposed to be a dating platform. It was like, what languages do you speak? People would be like Java, C++. I was like, oh, that's a platform to speak with people from all around the world and date them, mingle, do something. Nah. Maybe gay, maybe straight, and nah. We were in our high school, we were dodging 8200. I'm not joking. We were dodging 8200 by taking by taking French instead of Arab. And and it's a very good thing because now Uranus is in Gemini, and those that manage to dodge 8200, it's a very good thing because our Uranus opposition is from Gemini. Gemini has no filter. Like people that actually went and got security classification, I, it's an invalid NDA. um, so and the importance was to develop both the artistic and the technological aspect of our lives, at least mine. um, I think it will now here's the thing, the millennials are having their Uranus oppositions. We are worse than Gen Z because we actually, how should I say that? Gen Z would still have an eat the rich perspective, not the millennials. This is how you hear opinions like, oh, abolishing learning orgasmic birthing lineages as life transitions and entering tantric embodiment rather than drug-induced pedophilia is leveling up in spirit and matter in abundance, life satisfaction, than, let's say, the Epstein dossiers. It's a different type of those of us that went to JP Morgan, some of them are no longer with us. I was at that juncture with IBM, and I think it was investment of JP Morgan in the youngpreneurs, and it was pretty obvious that they were not looking for the big world changing patents, innovations. Um, and this is now I'm thinking of ideas of what could we do with the North Sea energy other than sell water, which is, I mean, it's possible, but to get people, we would have to have people visiting the North Sea to not see it as colonialism. We would really have to have like dividends for people visiting Netherlands and saying, oh, so that they could connect to the fact that the water that they buy, let's say, is actually helping Netherlands to deal with the flood. But they would, and um, particularly with Chiron Taurus, we're going to have a deindustrialization while Pluto is an industrial boom. The good thing about it is that the value-based economy or the communal-based economy, I believe, will grow. It's like people, how should I say that? Wealth redistribution could probably be going better, but we really need your orgasmic bursting lineages to, I need to practice more to basically come up with kind of a more refined idea. I'm just brainstorming right now. Market shock, Bretton Woods system collapse, ending the gold standard. Now, here is a fascinating thing. What is ending the gold standard right now is actually the fact that we've learned to make gold. Because we learned to make gold, we can manufacture gold the way we manufactured paper money. And so people were sold on retrieving the gold standard, and those of them that didn't get that technological information, they would think gold standard like Standard Oil gold standard. No, gold is going to be paper money. Gold is going to be fiat. Good thing, bad thing, who knows? And this was the beginning of the total transition to to fiat, because we had a transition to fiat after the Second World War. It was a partial transition. People just began, in Hebrew there was a satire that talked about it being bet tashlumim, basically the credit line. Everybody began to buy things now and pay later. I remember when I grew up, I was kind of like the Gen Zers. I said, Mom, we need to be able to buy a house in cash. We need to be able to buy a car in cash. I'm like, I'll go to work, I'll save money, I'll buy. That was my naivete back then. It's also why I didn't cooperate with the credit bubble, because I needed to understand what I'm doing fiscally. Basis level of understanding, okay? I'm not speaking as an economist. I needed to understand on the basis, what am I doing? But our generation, we would look at millionaires and we would not hate millionaires. Some of our peers did, but we would not hate millionaires. We would just look at them and say, okay, what do they do? And it was not about becoming a billionaire or having the fancy mansion. It was simply about, not being in poverty mindset. And this is also was bringing the resources economy. Particularly around the Uranus ingress to Aries, we had this notion of, wait a second, what do I need? Aries, Mars, survivalistic. I need a house. My salary is supposed to accommodate for the house. Wait, we're trying to retrieve back the connection between what is that money going on, how do we invest the money that we make, what is it for, to how much do we want to be paid for a job. And the shadow side was the work for housing trend that could enable slavery. Whereas on another hand, if there is a venue to inherit the land, it can be, or inherit the part of the land, it can be a venue for wealth transition, providing value. And then the question was, particularly at about 2018-19 with the ingress of Chiron, what about disabilities? What about the people who are not able to work? What about the neurodivergent people? And the need to accommodate, let's say, the market. Policy failure. Traditional economic tools fail to fix simultaneous inflation and recession. Monetary policies used by the Federal Reserve to end stagflation, specific impact of OPEC oil shocks, a comparison of how these decades affected a specific country. Okay, so in Israel, for example, there was an attempt to generate an investment bubble. And here again, when I was living with my mom at my grandma to study in a public school, but a public school in central Israel, I would get the education around the Great Depression. And also later I studied filmmaking and the film around the Great Depression, the use of escapism around that time. Fascinating courses. But this is where you wouldn't think that filmmaking would be a place to get educated economically, but it's one of the best things because we were very much at the juncture of the cultural and the fiscal. For example, astrologically speaking, I could be considered the Steven Spielberg of astrology because I haven't actually got a certification, but I delved forging through to the topic that until today almost none of my peers dares to, and and this is where I also had to give a caution tale. Um, um, because taking for example Nicholas Stoyanovich, degree theory and true crime astrology to the outer planets, adding horrors to the outer planets, talking about societal things behind. That was something that, for one reason, for whichever reason, my teachers couldn't do. And so, um, the bubble that was generated in the 70s is something people need a forewarning to. Now, here is the thing: before the subprime crisis, there was a warning in the economic, let's just say, those who read the economy news. There was a warning that, hey, the subprime is going to go go down, but it's not to buy a house in a um, subprime sensitive mortgage. Naturally, not everybody listens, and people bought houses, or people already had houses, but the big issue was not necessarily the people that already had a mortgage that they could alter, but the boom of mortgage that were um, basically, here we call it samud madad, which were basically attached to the subprime, and the banks were selling them like nuggets. And people, I see it right now. If I go at any city, almost any city, I see houses, vacant houses. And I see that and I see that together. And I'm like, I know that my channel has 33 viewers, and most of the world has no clue that any subprime tentativity could get their bankers calling saying, oh my God, we give you excellent mortgage conditions for this house. You could buy a house in Tel Aviv, you could buy a house in here, you could buy a house in there. And here is the thing. Usually it plays to the people that have maybe some money in the bank. Here is something. If you had a house that you owned, getting assisted housing is very difficult. And when they want to downplay the value of the real estate, they know how to do that with crime. They're just going to make the place unsafe to raise children, and people are going to move at best from renting, from living in their own house to renting, and they won't be able, they will have to flip the houses, or the houses will be confiscated by the banks. Now, in the 70s, they tried to generate an investment bubble, not a subprime bubble per se, but an investment bubble. They tried to grant people, and they're doing it using AI as well, that they're always going to exponentially grow. And then people think that the responsible thing is to put their money on the dollar. Let me tell you something. I had a pitch to a company called Eagle. And I said, my pitch was the following: let's have a stream social media. Gonna go to homeless people. Gonna give them 5 shekels. One of the 5 shekels they're gonna invest. I'm gonna put that shekel to work with the $1. They're going to put that $1 to work, and we're going to have a screen where people, children, adults could see what is that dollar doing. And of course, extra addition, what is each company? How is the ethics from the mining of the minerals? It's going to be excellent for investors. It's going to be fantastic for angel investors. We can have AI doing the analytic reports. I wasn't thrown out the stairs, but I was elegantly and eloquently said, we don't expose our public and private investors. Meaning, not only is our public money classified, or what's it doing, but also there wasn't the willingness to educate the people, and that was before the Epstein dossiers. Add to the fact that around the Me Too, I realized as holistic health practitioner, both from my academic research and my apprenticeship in aromatherapy, that basically it's impossible to have, even in the most sex positive, it's impossible to have intercourse as a job. Not only that, when we talk about the fifth vital sign and the holistic nervous system, a lot of the sex work jobs are basically medically impossible. It's also true to marriage. um, like I said, I was they somebody asked me, Shirley, when will you have children? Then I began to do the prep for orgasmic birthing, thinking about, oh, well, I had a business coach that said, oh, it's like growing a baby. And I'm like, it also came up with the thesis itself. And I was like, I was child free back then. I was like, I wasn't doing those practices to birth babies necessarily, but to. um, Now, the deindustrialization, and yes, by 2030, which is already 2 minutes from here, I mean um, we're gonna have the 2027 eclipses in North Africa, and then 2030, we're gonna have Ketu in Gemini, co-present with Uranus, with Lilith, with Saturn, which definitely is deindustrialization. It's also a little bit of desertification, but it's going to be an expansion of cities, but they're going to be more village-like. If I think about Petach Tikva, which is basically Em HaMoshavot, the mother of the villages, it was a city in Israel or in Palestine. One of the founders, I was yesterday in Tel Aviv, one of the founders has a restaurant. I think no, that was not the restaurant. I'm not sure about the restaurant. There was somebody who was linked to the Atzmon family, There's also a real estate family. Um, and basically, what I was thinking about, or what I had in mind around COVID, where I had my Ra return, when Ra was in Gemini, was basically that the cities are going to need to look more like villages. I know in Amsterdam, actually around Transformatorweg, which was a juvenile prison that was transformed to a shelter, there was something that reminded me a lot of the spirit of the kibbutz, but I couldn't visit there. I think it was because of COVID. And this is a spirit of acidification, but way more expanded. It makes a lot more sense. It maintains the greenery, even where around where my mother was born, which is Ramat Gan, which is basically a city that maintained a lot of, they call it the green lungs of the city. I still had breathing difficulties there. But as much as I love the idea of a penthouse and sustaining the food, I think that the bigger projects are going to be the city that is village-like. Now, in the 90s, we had an influx of people that immigrated from the Soviet Union and from Ethiopia at the same time. And some of those village-like... מה? כן, בתיאבון. התפוחי אדמה עוד לא. התפוחי אדמה עוד לא. And this was an attempt to create kind of like a Dutch quasi-ecosystemic city. Not zero cars, but definitely... by the way, I don't build much on the zero cars. I build more on the fact that there are going to be ecosystemic supersonic boom planes. And that they're landing, that they're going to have way more immediacy. So the entire infrastructure of cities is probably going... and the greenery is probably going to be way more maintained. When people think about the car-less villages, I would make sure that the design is fit to a plane landing, because we're going to have ecosystemic supersonic boom crossing planes. In fact, we already do. So and the lineages that are more along the lines of the orgasmic birth and lineages, and those that do the tending to that, they're gonna be way better off, because the Venus that's gonna be in Sagittarius will